Greetings, everyone. This is Mike Lyons with Healthcare Leadership Live. Welcome to the show. If you're listening to us on LinkedIn, welcome. And if you're listening to us on a podcast, we're excited to have you as well. Today's guest is Mandy Cansler, and I'm excited to have Mandy here on the show. She's from Mandy Cansler Consulting, and we're going to talk a little bit about her background and what she's all about. But we're going to talk about leadership and communication, and these are topics I'm super passionate about. And I think you're going to find that Mandy is so good with communication and so approachable, and just she's a fun person to get to know. I've loved getting to know her. So Mandy, welcome to Healthcare Leadership Live.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I love having people on that are just cool and smart and fun, and they're into healthcare, and you check all those boxes. And you in particular have a lot of experience in ophthalmology, which is an area I'm very passionate about as well. So would you mind just starting off and tell us a little bit about your background in ophthalmology and what's brought you to this place here in your career?
Yes, so I started in ophthalmology as a student through a local program at a community college that was here in my hometown. I live in Hickory, North Carolina, and I was actually on the wait list, similar to what several other stories have been, to go into nursing, thinking that, healthcare nursing is where you start. It's where you go. And so 20 something years ago, there was a 2 to 3 year wait for the nursing program. And they opened this 1 year program up called the Ophthalmic Medical Assistant Program. And at that time, I was a waitress. I was working in a barbecue restaurant, and I was like, for the next 2 years, what am I going to do? So I decided to do this program. It was in healthcare. I did not know much about eyes other than I had 2 of them, and they seemed to be pretty small. So how complex could that be? And then fell in love with it. So when I started doing clinical rotations through a private practice, I went through a few different practices and then joined a practice in August of 2000. And fast forward 24 and a half years later, that is where I spent my entire career in a private practice until October of 2024. And I stepped away from being an administrator, took a sabbatical for a few weeks, and then launched my kind of hung my own shingle in consulting. So it's been a wonderful journey. The first 12 years of it, I was a technician. So I worked through various subspecialties, workup tech, scribe, surgery scheduler. I was just hungry to work in whatever area of the clinic that I could. We had every subspecialty except neuro. We were an MD only practice. And so then about 2012, my boss came to me and offered me to consider taking a promotion as a clinical leader. And quite frankly, I thought she was crazy. I was like, there's no way. I'm a great technician, but I am not cut out to be a leader. I was so comfortable in the clinic, and she didn't leave me alone. She came to me a couple of more times, and we talked about what my reservations and what my doubts were. And I ended up hesitantly accepting the role, and I fell in love with it. And then I spent the last 8.5 years as the chief clinical officer of the practice. So I had a lot of opportunity to serve in various roles. So it's been a real journey.
I love that story because I saw it many times working in ophthalmology, where someone would come in and they're usually young, right? And maybe not sure what they want to do. And maybe they're thinking about med school or optometry school or maybe nursing, like you said. And they find out, wow, what a fun specialty to be in. And I'm sure this happens across other specialties in healthcare, but they woid get excited, and then you could see career growth kind of happen. Mm-hmm. And that your story right there, it just kind of typifies what I saw happen with a number of people And I think that's just so cool that you got to do that. You probably learned a lot along the way about what it's like to be a young, person interested in healthcare and growing yourself as a leader.
Absolutely. I still am. I feel like I learn something all the time. There was never a boring day, whether it be as a technician or a mid-level leader or, a higher level leader. I was always learning something. Sometimes it was learning from my own failures. Sometimes it was learning what my team taught me, learning through challenges, but there's just never been a boring day or a day that did not lend the opportunity to grow and learn.
I love that. And that gives me a good opportunity to say, if you are listening here to LinkedIn Live or YouTube Live, and you have a question for Mandy, or if you have a comment, we love questions here on Healthcare Leadership Live. We love comments. You can put those comments into the comment area or the chat area. We will see your comment and we will discuss your comment. This is a great opportunity to learn from someone like Mandy, or just say hi. If you know me or Mandy, comment and say hi. We love that. But back to your journey there, Mandy. So now you talked about you've set up your own consulting practice. What kinds of things do you help clinics do with your work now?
So there's a few different areas of services that I do. As well as consulting for my company, I still do some instructional training for iTech training out of Florida, where I may go into practices for new hire training, boot camps, development, leadership training with my consulting business. Streamlining operations. And so organizational development, how to help practices become more efficient and align to their purpose of what they're doing. So that's where I spend my time in consulting, as well as I've been spending a lot of time on podcasts like these recently.
Okay.
Yes, it's been fun. It's new to me, but I've really been enjoying that, as well as keynote speaking. I do CE content for ophthalmic certifications, as well as leadership development, speaking around trauma informed or trauma led leadership, and just people development.
Okay. Those are all great things, and thank you for giving of your time there with that. And for those of you who can't see the live stream or the video, Mandy has her COMT, which is, if correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a certified ophthalmic medical technician, right?
Almost technologist.
Yes, okay. Yeah. And you have a COE, which is the certified ophthalmic executive. Through ASOA, is that right?
Correct.
Yes. And then Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, is that?
Yeah. So
you're a green belt. Okay, don't hurt me. Don't chop me up. Okay. Well, so that's so obviously Mandy has a great deal of experience here in operations. But one thing I wanted to really hit on here is about leadership. When I looked at you've done a lot of writing about leadership and communication, and it seems as though you are really passionate about the people side of the business. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So the people side of the business is what I'm most passionate about. It's the backbone of what we do in any organization. But I learned when I transitioned from technician to leader, it's a different set of skills. I related to patients when I was patient facing, and I learned how to do that well, how to be empathetic with patients, how to navigate difficult conversations with patients. It's a whole different ball game when you step into leading people. because there's the emotional component of that. And it's not just, I hear people say hard skills and soft skills. And I used to be guilty of using that term, but I don't find them to be soft skills. I find them to be very vital skills. And I don't think that they're really negotiable skills to have at this stage of the game in 2025. And so leading people was something that it was intriguing to me, because I had to begin to study how to lead people. It was not something that better 1, 2, and you give them a pair of glasses or you measure the eye pressure and you move on. It was a different type of task. It was a different type of journey. And I'm still on that quest. So I've been doing this. I started studying leadership in 2016 after leading for about 4 years and wanting to understand better how to connect. As we were having growth in the clinic and across multiple departments, I was over more than just the clinical department. And how do you navigate that? Because with growth comes change and questions and uncertainty with your team. And so I really started doing some research in 2016, reading books, listening to podcasts, exposing myself to experts in the field of how do you do what you do? You know, how do you lead the way that you lead, and wanting to be a better leader.
So when you think about the things that you learned, I don't know, maybe were there 1 or 2 sources of information or books or philosophies that really influenced you?
Yes. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard, there were a couple of books. The first couple of books that I read that really stuck with me was Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
Very familiar. And
I love Brene because Brene has a little bit of a messy background, right? Her past is, she didn't live in a glass house, and she vulnerably shared her story to help other people understand themselves better so that they could serve better. And so that really opened me to vulnerability in the workplace. I've always been kind of I connect easily with people. I love people. I feed off the energy of being around people. But in the workplace, I seem to be more reserved in authentically showing up as myself as a leader, because what if it wasn't professional? I showed too much of who I was. I needed to be, this specific person. And so reading and listening to her podcast, I read a book, is it The Hospitable Table? Welcome to the Table, The Hospitable Leader. If you've never read that book. And it was something that really was eye-opening for me as well, in terms of creating a welcoming environment, that everyone has a voice, no matter what their place is on that team, and creating that environment. So I think between vulnerability, defining what my values were, what my triggers were, how I show up in situations, is really kind of where that journey started.
I completely agree with, you've got to look inside yourself as a leader. And, you talked about technical skills, and we're talking a little bit about emotional intelligence there, right? And those are still those are important skills to have, as you said. And then going all the way into the deep center of yourself, the sensitive parts, right? That's when you become a leader, you get challenged and things start to come up for you emotionally that never came up before, I think. Have you experienced that, or did you experience that?
Oh, yes. And as our roles grow as leaders, when you're when I was working in a patient-facing role, I would finish a task I had in my inbox, or finish an email, or finish with a patient, finish the surgery charts, and you could kind of wrap it up by the end of the day. As a leader, the job is never done. It's always there. So if we're not doing the work on ourselves, we are taking it home with us, even if it's just mentally. And then you can't be present at home. And so I found that it was really hard to be mentally present anywhere, because as my role grew, I was carrying more with me. And I had to learn, what are my values? When I start spiraling, or I feel resentful of how much I'm carrying, or things just feel out of balance for me, there's no work-life balance, if you will, I learned that it's typically because I have either not protected my boundaries or I've not lived with inside of my values. And once I start living outside of my values is when I can feel all of these other habits and behaviors and emotions starting to creep in.
It's so important to know your values. Yeah, know what you stand for. That's really profound. You gotta need to know what your organization stands for and what you personally stand for, and you're going to be challenged as a leader, right? Are there tips, like if there was maybe one or two tips, like, when you're feeling challenged as a leader, things that people can do, because I'm sure there are people listening right now that are going through that. They're in a leadership spot where they're like, oh man, I don't feel supported, or I'm having to do some hard things and I'm not sure this is working out, or I'm having self-doubt, right? Is there maybe a specific behavior that people can do, you think, to counteract that?
I think stepping back to identify with what your why is. When I get, in times and I still have to be aware of that. When I become misaligned with the why, then all of the noise kind of creeps in and it just feels unattainable. I would also say that if someone's feeling unsupported and that's what's causing some of the self-doubt to come in, share it with your leader in an open way. It takes trust and connection to lead our teams, but it also takes trust and connection for our leaders to be able to guide the way for us. We have to be able to communicate. And so, share when things start feeling that way, because it may be that your leader doesn't know. As leaders, we're not mind readers. And sometimes the pulse can feel off and we don't know if it's something personal going on in their life. So I would say communicate about it, take a step back and realign with your why and what do you need to get there so that you can start weeding out the facts from the emotion of what's going on.
That is separating the facts from the emotion. There was a lot that you just said right there. So I'll back up. So the why, I agree. So important to know, why am I doing this? And you're a consultant, you work for yourself. I'm in the same situation, and I've got a little note card right here by the computer of my why. And I think that's a great tip for people to have, is to every day remind yourself, why am I doing this? What is it that's motivating me? And it could be, maybe because I want to achieve something, right? But maybe you also want to be a better version of yourself. Or maybe it's because you want to be the leader you never had, or whatever the case may be. But remind yourself. And those are some of the, things that I think about. And then facts versus emotions. And I think I got this from Brene Brown, is what is the story you're telling yourself?
That's right. That is Brene.
I'm telling myself a story. And that's a great tip. Like if you're having a conflict with someone, like, the story I'm telling myself about this situation is, have you ever tried that? And do you feel like that is a good technique to employ?
Absolutely. I live by that. And I saw a lot of wins within my own team when I was willing to show up, whether it be with a colleague. I worked very closely on an operations team. And when you're in a room making tough decisions under high pressure, sometimes under tight deadlines, those things are going to happen to where you're not going to agree on something specific, or you're picking up something from someone that maybe they're not intending to come across to you, and you start to make that story up. And so can I share the story? Can I share the story that I'm creating in my own mind? To be fair to you, I want you to know what that story is, and then you could confirm if it's real or not. And I found that to be really helpful.
Yeah, my wife and I will do that with each other, quite honestly. And it's a helpful, it disarms the other person just a little bit, because you're saying, I realize this might be just a story. And so I'm going to tell you that this is a story I'm telling I don't know if it's true or not. And so it invites that conversation. So it shows humility I think,
I agree.
which helps a lot. It seems like you have, in looking at some of your writing and the things you've talked about in your blogs, you're really passionate about helping staff grow and become, help them achieve their goals. Is that something that's been a big part of your career? And how do you feel like leaders can help their staff grow?
Yeah, so it's been very much a big part of my career. And I think about, I want to give back. I've had some really amazing people that have invested in me. And when we talked about when I went into a leadership role, that was not something I even saw myself doing. And remembering that when we are looking for growth, you posted something about this week on LinkedIn, looking internally before externally at times to offer that opportunity for growth. But, many times we see the potential in someone else before they see it in themselves. And our role as leaders is to get people in the right seats on the bus. And, they may be doing what they're doing really, really well, but have they been doing that for 10 or 12 years? And, how could they grow? How can you leverage what they have to strengthen your team? And so I think it is our role to identify what are the key areas, the players on our team that could be shifted around to really elevate themselves so that you can continue to move forward and grow. And then keeping in mind that somebody did that for me. I never probably ever would have stepped outside of patient-facing role because I absolutely loved patient care. And there was that part of me, I didn't want to separate myself from that. And then I had to think the bigger picture is, while I may not be serving these patients one-on-one by touching them individually in the exam lane, I am serving them through the people that I'm preparing to carry out that experience to improve year over year and to think of it differently. And so I think that that the biggest part of our job as leaders is how to work ourselves out of a job. How do you build somebody else up to know what you know and share that so that you can watch them thrive? And sometimes they move on. Sometimes they outgrow your team, and it's bittersweet because it's like, boo for me, but yay for you. Because I've always said, if I keep an employee, I would want to keep them for the right reasons. And if I lose one, I want to lose them for the right reasons. So if it's the opportunity, then kudos, you did your job. And they stepped up and were brave enough to step through that door.
Well, I can tell you are so passionate about helping people grow. Is there one thing, if I'm an administrator out there, and I want to help somebody grow or help my team elevate themselves in the way that maybe you got that same kind of help, what advice would you give to that administrator who wants to grow their team?
I would say have conversations with your team when it's time to do an evaluation, an annual evaluation. Really talk about what are their goals. And, it's important to know what their goals are, but sometimes we have to outline goals for them as well so that they don't become complacent, just continuing to do what they're really great at. And that's a slippery slope. You can be really, really good at something and not realize that over time you're becoming complacent. So our role is to keep them engaged and to keep them challenged. And I think having those conversations of what are your goals and being able to work backwards from that. If this is the goal that we want to be in, if in 2027, this person wants to be a clinic supervisor, or they want to be a clinical coordinator, they want to be a director of clinical services, then what are the behaviors and what are the skills that they need to work on and start working backwards? And if you want to be here by this time, what do you need to be doing right now? And how can I support you in that?
I recently published a blog post about hiring a supervisor in healthcare and ophthalmology, and because that's a key time, right? You're you need a new leader and you're going to select someone, and so that's a key thing. What are the top one or two traits that you think practice administrators should be looking for when they're going to elevate someone into a leadership position?
The top two, I would say, I'm thinking back, and I'll be the first to say that I've made a wrong decision in the past, more than once, of putting someone in a role that said all of the right things in an interview, and they had performed really well, but I needed to hone in a little more on character, because the number one trait that I have seen that does not work out, that is so important, is humility. You can have someone that's excellent at all of the things, but if they don't have humility, then it's going to be a short-lived journey in that role. So I think humility and the ability to pivot and change, because in the ophthalmology industry, along with really any industry, and healthcare is changing all the time. Our EHRs change, our vendors that we are interfacing into our software change. We have people that leave the practice, people that join the practice, doctors that retire, doctors that change the flow of their clinic. There are so many moving pieces that as a leader, they need to be willing to, they have to possess the trait of the ability to pivot and change. If change is something that's difficult for someone, or that tends to stress them out, then they're not going to be able to be a leader long term. They're going to burn out and crash and burn pretty quickly, because if we do anything as leaders, it's constant change.
Yes, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. Humility is such a key trait for a leader, because as a leader, you're never going to have all the answers. You're never going to have all the answers. And in fact, you shouldn't have you should be tapping into the knowledge of your team and just kind of helping to shape that. Right. And so that's a death knell if you're not humble. Those are two great things to look for. We had a comment here from Eric Hutter. He talks about how clear goals help keep people moving forward. And so you talked about, challenging people and saying, hey, how can we give you a new goal to hit? And that can really help motivate people. And I think it helps to them to see, oh, wow, they want to stretch my capacity a little. They see something in me that, it sounds like you Mandy, had that experience a little bit of like, here's a goal and we think you can hit that.
Yes, it's and then for that person, we don't know what people live in outside of work. Sometimes the only place that they go to where someone believes in them is with us. And so really being able to offer that opportunity for someone to be able to achieve something, and then take that moment to celebrate the win. I think celebrating the wins is what, gives us momentum. And I agree with Eric. Thank you for sharing that comment, that, keeping people moving forward is giving them goals so that they are engaged. The statistics show that if they've not changed in the last year or so, that almost 80% of the workforce is disengaged. And that's a scary statistic. And so I think that we have to think creatively, and we can't be reactive in it. And if we're not proactively thinking about, what's the next thing that this particular person could do, and then to grow and bring value to the team. But then remember, it's not just our job. We have other people on our teams that can help us with this. Who else is in the trenches? Who are your entry-level leaders or mid-level leaders? And what do they see? Because, they spend more time with these people. So as we work higher in different levels of roles, whether it be, operationally or whatever that looks like, we need to be attuned to what are they saying and what are they seeing in the areas that we're not as physically present in anymore, so that we can rely on other people around us to help us make those decisions, and then they can celebrate it with us.
Yeah. I mean, so many awesome things you said there about gratitude and listening to your team. I mean, you have to be humble. They take that humility, and then you start asking questions. How can I learn? How can I be better? And that is so key. I'm curious. Eric, thank you for your comment that you shared there. I'm wondering if anyone else listening live here has thoughts about how they have grown their team, or tips for how to grow your team, or things to look for in leaders. If you have a comment about that, we'd love to hear you share that in the live stream, because it's just so much more fun. We get to interact with you guys. And we have Mandy here to share her expertise and insight as well. If there is a technician out there who is listening and is interested in becoming a leader, what do you think that they should be, doing to try to help move themselves ahead?
When you want to move forward, it's really important that you are showing up every day as you would want to if you were going to step into that interview 6 months or a year down the road. Being a leader doesn't call for a title or a fancy corner office with a great view. It's what are you doing where your feet are moving? And, if you could be a workup tech and still be a leader. Who do people go to when they want to know, does this refraction make sense? Or should I dilate this patient? Get in the room and shadow the physicians. Learn what they're saying to their scribe and how to troubleshoot that when things aren't going well in the exam lane. It's typically because of something that was done before the patient got to them, so that they know, here's how what I do impacts the patient experience. And so start bettering yourself where you are, no matter what level of role that you're in. And start asking questions. Ask a trusted leader or a mentor or someone that you look up to that maybe is a lead tech or, an entry-level supervisor, and say, hey, I give you permission to share with me what are the areas that you feel like are my strengths and what do you feel like are my weaker areas. And, have that accountability with somebody that you give them the permission to share that with you, because it's hard to just go up to somebody and give feedback unless you've been leading for a long time and used to tough conversations. But you're going to be more willing to accept that feedback and apply it to your life if you ask for that feedback.
I mean, if I could probably count on one hand the number of times that someone has, been that direct about it, and it makes a tremendous impression every time, because it instantly shows humility, because you're saying, hey, I know I can get better. How can I get better? And then it makes it easier for you to, like exactly as you said, to share that feedback. And then you're able to give more candid feedback, and you're going to get way more constructive feedback if you do that. That is just that's gold right there. If you're out there listening and you want to grow your careers, ask for feedback, because exactly as you said, it is hard as a leader to just walk up to someone, even if you've been working for a while, and say, hey, I think you need to improve A, B, C, and D. Leaders need to get better at that, but we're often hesitant. We're often hesitant to really lay it out. And so that is like an amazing tip right there. So Mandy, we've touched on so many things, and I love talking to you. I think I could go for another hour here. The last thing I want to touch on a little bit is, I know you're working on a book. You've done a lot of writing. I looked at your LinkedIn, and you've all these amazing blog posts that, about communication and leadership. And I can tell that you are a super deep thinker about that stuff. And so we are very much kindred spirits there. But you're working on a bigger writing project. And so would you mind talking just briefly about your book that you're developing?
I would love to. So I am working on my first book. It's a memoir. The title is Not Enough Until I Was. And it is a story that goes from my childhood. I was adopted as a child, and I carried questions with me throughout my life that I really honestly did not realize were impacting me until over the last probably around the age of 40. I'm just a little over 40, but probably around the age of 40, I really started noticing how anxiety was showing up in my life and how not just personally, but I could feel it in how I would doubt myself. Imposter syndrome would creep in. I just had this constant question that once I slowed down long enough to listen to was, am I enough? And then as I thought back through my life, I realized that it's followed me my entire life. And when I look at all of the decisions that I've made throughout my life, it's all stemmed around that question. And so, we take our younger self, and even though we say we're going to leave our baggage at the door, it's not humanly possible. You bring who you are as your whole self into the workplace every day. And so I started doing some self-reflection, and the last 10 months or so has really allowed me to do some deep dive reflection on myself. And so I am now ready to share my story of not enough until I was. And that led me into, areas of my professional career that were chronic burnout. And where does that come from? I ended up at what many would say is the pinnacle of my career as the chief clinical officer. And no matter where I was in my career or my personal life, it just always felt like it wasn't enough. And it made me stop to think, where's this coming from? Where's it really coming from? And how can you identify that so that, you can begin to unravel and heal, and then lead from a place of wholeness, so that you could show up as a different wife, a different mom, a different leader, a different consultant. And so it's allowed me the opportunity to meet a lot of really great people like you, and to connect with people out there, and for others to realize that they're not alone. I found that through this journey that as humans, we actually have more in common than we have in differences. And it's been a really, that's been kind of an eye-opening experience to me, because we think that we're so different than everyone. And once you create a connection with someone, you realize that we have a lot more in common than what we think, and we're not meant to do life alone. And so I carried my story quietly for long enough, and I'm ready. I'm here for it.
Well, Mandy, I am so excited to hear about your book development. And I think, you're the real deal when it comes to leadership and just vulnerability. And so I'm so glad to know you. I'm so glad to have had you here. And I love talking with you. And I think we'll definitely talk again. So thanks for being with me today.
Thank you so much. And I want everyone on here to send Mike a happy birthday. Today is his birthday, and he's spending part of it with us on this amazing podcast. And so, Mike, thank you for what you're doing in ophthalmology and the eye industry. As you're grinding out here, I see you every single day, and it's very rare that I connect with somebody and ask them, "Hey, have you connected with Mike Lyons yet?" And they say no, because they are. And if you don't create that hashtag of I ain't lying.
I ain't lions.
I ain't lions. I love it. But this has been a lot of fun. I've really, really enjoyed it. And I've learned a lot from the previous podcast. And man, you just had some stars on here. So I've had a lot of takeaways over the last few months. So thank you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Well, it's my pleasure to meet folks like you that help me think on a new level. And help me elevate my leadership. So hopefully that's what we've been able to do for the listeners here today. If you're listening and you liked what we have to share, please subscribe, follow me on LinkedIn, definitely follow Mandy here on LinkedIn, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or what have you. I'm going to continue to share content that, is actionable to help healthcare and ophthalmology leaders to become better and level up, not just professionally, but personally. And that's what I'm excited about. So thank you for joining us here on Healthcare Leadership Live. And now go out there and lead with confidence.